Well, hello, Grandpa here. Grandpa went to Costco and did some shopping, and I browsed through the book section, and guess what I found? Big old, it's a fat book. It's Frog and Toad Storybook Favorites. Anyway, it has several stories in it and stuff, so that's probably what we're going to be reading for the next few times, put it that way. Anyway, I hope you like it. I hope I like it. Oh, I did look up to see what the difference was between a frog and a toad, since they both kind of look similar. I always knew that toads were bigger and frogs can be pretty small, but frogs evidently have longer legs for jumping. Toads don't jump. They, I guess they kind of crawl or something like that. Anyway, according to the internet. So anyway, here we go. Hope you enjoy it. Frog and the Toad, Storybook Favorites by Arnold Lobel. There they are. Frog and Toad are friends. Looks like, I'm not sure which one's which. I'm thinking this is the toad and this is the frog. And he's reading a book. Maybe he's a grandpa. Spring. Frog ran up the path to Toad's house. He knocked on the front door. There was no answer. Toad, Toad, shouted Frog. Wake up, it's spring. Blah, said a voice from inside the house. Toad, Toad, cried Frog. The sun is shining. The snow is melting. Wake up. I'm not here, said the voice. Frog walked into the house. It was dark. All the shutters were closed. Toad, where are you? Called Frog. Go away, said the voice from the corner of the room. Toad was lying in bed. He had pulled all the covers over his head. Frog pushed Toad out of bed. He pushed him out of the house and into the front porch. Toad blinked in the bright sun. Help, said Toad. I can't see anything. Don't be silly, said Frog. What you see is the clear, warm light of April, and it means that we can begin a whole new year together, Toad. Think of it, said Frog. We will skip through the meadows and run through the woods and swim in the rivers. In the evening, we will sit right here on the front porch and count the stars. You can count them, Frog, said Toad. I will be too tired. I'm going back to bed. Toad went back into his house. He got into bed and pulled the covers over his head again. But Toad, cried Frog, you will miss all the fun. Listen, Frog, said Toad. How long have I been asleep? You've been asleep since November, said Frog. Well then, said Toad, a little more sleep will not hurt me. Come back again and wake me up at about past May. Good night, Frog. He pulled the covers all back over his head. Toad is not a springtime person, I guess, huh? But Toad, said Frog, I will be lonely until then. Toad did not answer. He had fallen asleep. Frog looked at Toad's calendar. The November page was still on top. Frog tore off the November page. He tore off December page, and January page, and February page, and the March page. He came to the April page. Frog tore off the April page too. Then Frog ran back to Toad's bed. Toad, Toad, wake up. It is May now. What, said Toad. Can it be May so soon? Yes, said Frog. Look at your calendar. Toad looked at the calendar. The May page was on top. Why, it is May. said Toad as he climbed out of bed. Then he and Frog ran outside to see how the world was looking in the spring. I think Frog made a fib there. Let's read one more. That was pretty good. It says, The Story. One day in summer, Frog was feeling well, Toad said. Frog, are you looking quite green? But I always look green, said Frog. I am a frog. Today you look very green. Even for a frog, said Toad. Get into my bed and rest. Toad made Frog a cup of hot tea. Frog drank the tea, and then he said, Tell me a story while I am resting. Now, Frog's in bed and Toad's up. Like they spend a lot of time in her bed. All right, said Toad. Let me think of a story to tell you. Toad thought and thought, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. I will go out on the front porch and walk up and down, said Toad. Perhaps that will help me to think of a story. Toad walked up and down on the porch for a long time, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. Then Toad went into the house and stood on his head. Why are you standing on your head? Asked Frog. I hope that if I stand on my head, it will help me to think of a story, said Toad. There he is on his head. Toad stood on his head for a long time, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. Then Toad poured a glass of water over his head. Why are you pouring water over your head? Asked Frog. I hope that if I pour water over my head, it will help me to think of a story, said Toad. Toad poured many glasses of water over his head, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. There he is. That's kind of silly, pour water on your head. Then Toad began to bang his head against the wall. Why are you banging your head against the wall? Asked Frog. I hope that if I bang my head against the wall hard enough, it will help me to think of a story, said Toad. I am feeling much better now, Toad, said Frog. I do not think I need a story anymore. Then you get out of bed and let me get into it, said Toad, because now I feel terrible. Frog said, Would you like me to tell you a story, Toad? Yes, said Toad, if you know one. Once upon a time, said Frog, there were two good friends, a frog and a toad. The frog was not feeling well and asked his friend the toad to tell him a story. The toad could not think of a story. He walked up and down on the porch, but he could not think of a story. He stood on his head, but he could not think of a story. He poured water over his head, but he could not think of a story. He banged his head against the wall, but he could not think of a story. Then the toad did not feel so well, and the frog was feeling better. So the toad went to bed, and the frog got up and told him a story. The end. How is that, Toad? Said Frog. The toad did not answer. He had fallen asleep. He told him just what just happened. And that's it for today. Well, there you have it. 2 stories. Bonus. Anyway, the first story was called Springtime. And it seemed that Frog had to tell a little fib to Toad in order to get him out of bed. Kind of tricked him into thinking it was May instead of April. Anyway, Grandpa doesn't condone that. You should probably always tell the truth. So, anyway. The next story was The Story. And the story was about the story, I guess. Anyway, it was kind of funny. It seems like on both of these, the theme of both stories was that one of them was going to be in bed. And anyway, maybe this is a bedtime story for you, and maybe it's time to take a nap now. Anyway, Hope you enjoyed it. You know Grandpa does. And don't forget, Grandpa loves you. See you next time. Bye-bye.